You have spiritual eyes. God gave you the capacity to perceive His kingdom, to receive His provision, to operate from your authority as His son or daughter. This is not something you earned or achieved over time. This is something you inherited. It was written into your being before you took your first breath. You were born with this gift. Most Blaros know this intellectually. You have heard it taught in church. You know the verses. You understand the doctrine. You nod along when the pastor explains it. But the question I want to ask you is different from what you have heard before. Are you actually using them? Like really using them? When you pray, do you see what God is doing behind the scenes? When important decisions come, do you perceive the path He has already prepared for you? When provision appears at the door, do you recognize it? Or does it pass by while you are still looking somewhere else entirely? Or have they somehow been switched off? And I do not mean that in a spiritual or poetic way. I mean literally, something physical, something that happens in the actual machinery of how your brain works. Think about what you were like as a child. Many of you remember this clearly. You learned fast. Ideas came easy. You created things that surprised people. You saw connections others completely missed. You were different in a way that felt completely natural. You just knew things sometimes. Your mind worked like a receiver tuned to a frequency that most people around you never found. Teachers noticed it. Family noticed it. There was something alive in you that was unmistakable and undeniable. Then somewhere along the way, that clarity began to fade. It was not sudden. It was not dramatic or obvious. It was a slow dimming that happened, so gradually you almost did not notice. First, it was just stress from school or work. Then, it was overwhelm from responsibilities. Then, it became your normal state of being. And you stopped expecting that sharpness to return because you believed you had simply grown up. You told yourself that is just how adults feel. Everyone is tired. Everyone has brain fog. It is normal. Now you feel the fog constantly. Brain fog. A kind of dullness that no amount of coffee or sleep or discipline seems to touch or shift. You try to think clearly about something important, and everything is just muffled. Like you are listening to life through a thick wall. And when you look back at who you were as a child, you wonder where that sharpness went. You wonder if you lost it somewhere, or if something else happened to you. Something deeper. Something that got switched off somehow. Here is what most believers are told when they hit this exact wall. You need more faith. You need more prayer. You need more discipline. You need to push harder, believe bigger, try more, become more, do more. Earn it somehow through your own effort. And you have tried. Many of you have tried everything. You downloaded the prayer apps and kept them open for weeks. You committed to the daily practices and showed up even when it felt completely empty. You believed deeply. You confessed the right things. You fasted. You sought. But somewhere in all of that trying and striving, a gap opened up that no amount of effort could close. Your spirit says yes to what God has promised, but something in you cannot quite receive it. You know in your bones that God has abundance for you. You know He is faithful. You know He has already gone before you and arranged provision. And yet when those provisions come near, something in you cannot quite perceive them. Something in you cannot quite reach them. It is like the receiver is set to the wrong frequency. And the question I kept running into was this exact one. What if the problem was never your faith at all? What if you are not broken and you are not failing? What if you are not lazy and you are not cursed with bad luck or a family curse? What if something was simply switched off and can be switched back on? What if it is that simple? What if it is actually that physical? What if restoration is not about trying harder, but about restoring something that already exists dormant deep inside you? Let me explain what I mean. There is a teacher from decades ago named Kenyon. Many of you have never heard that name. But if you have ever sat in a church that teaches that you are a son or daughter of God, that you are seated with Christ in heavenly places, that you have authority and dominion, that you are a new creation right now in this life. Then you have been touched by what Kenyon understood and taught. He called it the New Creation Awakening. And one of the core principles he kept returning to was this, that every believer has been given spiritual faculties, spiritual senses, spiritual eyes, spiritual ears, the ability to perceive what God is doing in the unseen realm. This is not poetic language. This is not metaphor. When Paul writes to the believers in Ephesus, he does not say, "I hope you might eventually develop spiritual eyes." He says, "I pray that the eyes of your understanding will be enlightened." He assumes they are already there. He just asks God to open them, to activate them, to make them functional. The capacity already exists. It is built in. It is native to who you are as a believer. Think about how your physical eyes work. You were born with them. You did not have to earn the ability to see. You did not have to achieve sight through discipline or good behavior. Your eyes were simply given to you from birth. They functioned, and because they functioned, you could perceive the visible world around you. You could see danger coming. You could find food. You could navigate toward what you needed. Your physical eyes gave you access to an entire dimension of reality. Spiritual eyes work exactly the same way. They are already yours. They are built into your new creation identity. When you became a believer, when you received Christ, something shifted in you at the deepest level. You became a new creation. Old things passed away. All things became new. And embedded in that new creation is the capacity to perceive spiritual reality, to see what God is doing, to recognize His hand moving, to understand the deep things that are happening behind what your physical eyes can see. But here is where the gap appears. Most believers have these eyes, and they believe intellectually that they have them. They can quote the theology. They can explain the doctrine perfectly. But when they actually try to USE those eyes, nothing happens. Or worse, they try to use them and get no response at all. So they assume they either do not actually have them, or they are broken somehow. They blame themselves. They think they are the problem. A woman sits in her car in a parking lot, and she prays for wisdom about a major decision. She believes God has promised to guide her. She knows He leads those who follow Him. But when she opens her spiritual eyes and reaches out to perceive His direction, she gets nothing back. Silence, static, no clear knowing, no sense of which way is His way. So she sits there and she feels stupid, and she assumes she must just be one of those people who cannot hear God very well. A man knows that his father has already prepared provision for his family. He knows the promises. He has read the verses 100 times. He knows that God cares about his needs. But when he looks around at his life, he cannot quite see the provision that is supposed to already be there. He cannot perceive it. It is like his receiver is tuned to the wrong channel, and all he gets is static and lack and limitation. So he keeps pushing and trying and struggling, wondering if maybe the promises are just for other people. This is the experience of most believers in most churches. The teaching is there, the truth is there, the capacity is there, but the actual functioning is not working. The eyes that are supposed to be open are closed. The receiver that is supposed to be tuned in is just generating noise. And so people spend decades trying to force themselves to perceive something that they believe they should be able to perceive but simply cannot. And the question becomes, if 9 out of 10 believers have these spiritual eyes, but only 1 out of 10 is actually using them, actually perceiving clearly, actually recognizing what their Father is doing, then what is the difference? What is making the difference between the one who can hear and the 9 who cannot? The problem has a name. It is called brain fog. But it is not just fog. It is a kind of dullness that sits on everything you try to do. When you wake up in the morning, your mind is slow to start. It takes 3 cups of coffee, just to feel like you are thinking in actual words instead of in slow motion. Your thoughts feel heavy. Processing anything requires so much effort, and by afternoon your mind is basically shut down. You cannot think clearly about anything that matters. You cannot perceive nuance or subtle things anymore. Everything has to be spelled out and obvious, or you just miss it completely. Creativity has died. Solutions that used to come easily now require hours of struggle. You sit at a problem, and your mind just feels empty, like the well has run dry, like something that used to flow is now blocked. And the worst part is, you remember when it was different. You remember when you could think, when your mind was sharp and alive, and could make connections, and see what others could not see. Now you sit in meetings, and everyone else seems to be thinking clearly, and you are just trying to keep up. You are exhausted from the effort of basic thinking. This fog touches everything. It touches your prayer life. You try to sit down and connect with God, and your mind immediately starts wandering. You cannot hold a thought. You cannot really focus or listen deeply. So you pray, but it feels like praying into a wall. Your words feel empty. There is no real connection happening. You know what you are supposed to feel, but you do not feel it. You know what you are supposed to perceive, but perception is not coming. It is like your receiver just will not tune in. It touches your relationships too. Someone needs you to really listen and really understand what they are saying underneath what they are saying. But you cannot do that anymore. You cannot pick up on the subtle things. You cannot read the room. You cannot perceive what is actually going on emotionally because your perception is just offline. So you miss things. People feel unseen by you, and you feel terrible about that. But you do not know how to fix it. And you have tried everything. You know you have. You tried discipline. You set up routines and showed up every single day, even when it felt pointless. You said no to Netflix and late nights. You committed to sleep schedules, and you kept them. You drank water instead of coffee in the afternoons. You did all the things they say to do. You became disciplined. But the fog did not lift. Your thinking did not clear, and so you are sitting there wondering if maybe you are just broken somehow. Maybe your brain is just like this now. Maybe this is permanent. Maybe this is just who you are and you have to accept it. Or you tried meditation. You downloaded the apps. You sat down for 20 minutes a day. You tried to quiet your mind, like they say to do. You tried to breathe and be present, and observe your thoughts without judgment. You sat there, and your mind just continued to be exactly as foggy and unclear as always. So you stuck with it because maybe you were doing it wrong. Maybe if you just kept going, it would suddenly click. After weeks or months, you finally admitted to yourself that this is not working. This is not the answer. Or you tried prayer, desperate prayer. You confessed the promises. You spoke the names of God. You asked for breakthrough and clarity and wisdom. You fasted and sought and did everything you knew to do spiritually. You believed. You really did believe that God would answer, and that your mind would be cleared, and that you would suddenly perceive clearly again. And you waited. You kept waiting, but nothing shifted. Nothing changed. The fog stayed exactly where it was. And now you are beginning to wonder if maybe the problem is that God is not really meeting you the way you thought He was supposed to meet you. Maybe the promises were not written for people like you. Many of you have been here. You know exactly what this feels like. The endless fog, the exhaustion of trying, the disappointment of nothing working, the slow creeping belief that maybe you are just broken and there is nothing that can really help. You have blamed yourself. You have wondered if it is a spiritual failure. You have worried that maybe you just do not have enough faith, or you are not spiritual enough, or you do not belong in the group of people who can actually perceive what God is doing. But what if that belief is wrong? What I am about to tell you changed everything for me. It opened a door I did not even know was closed. Decades ago, There was a Nobel Prize-winning neuroscientist named Roger Sperry. In 1981, he published research that revealed something extraordinary about how the human brain actually works. He discovered that your brain has two hemispheres, and those two hemispheres are designed to work together in perfect synchronization. They talk to each other constantly. They coordinate. They balance each other. And when they are working together in sync, something remarkable happens. Your whole brain activates, full capacity. You perceive clearly. You think creatively. You make intuitive leaps that seem to come from nowhere. You just know things. Your receiver is tuned in. You are awake. But here is what Sperry also discovered. In most adults, that synchronization has quietly switched off. The two hemispheres are no longer talking to each other the way they were designed to. They are not fighting each other. It is not that one side is winning. It is that the communication between them has simply gone offline. And when that happens, your whole brain does not activate anymore. You are operating at partial capacity. You are like a computer running with half of its processor shut down. You can still function. You can still work and think and live, but you are not operating at full power. You are operating in a fog. This is not a spiritual problem. This is not a character flaw. This is not because you are lazy or undisciplined or faithless. This is neurological. This is physical. This is about the actual wiring of your brain and whether or not that wiring is functioning the way it was designed to function. And most of the things we try to fix this with do not actually address the wiring at all. Prayer addresses the spiritual dimension. Discipline addresses your choices. Meditation addresses your thoughts. But none of those things fix the actual physical synchronization that has gone offline in your brain. Think about it this way. If your car stops working, you can sit there and tell it to work harder. You can believe really hard that it will work. You can say positive affirmations to the car. You can be very disciplined about turning the key. But if the actual engine is not functioning, none of that will make a difference. The engine does not care how much faith you have. The engine has a mechanical problem that requires a mechanical solution. It needs to be fixed at the level where it is broken. Your brain is the same way. When the synchronization between your hemispheres has switched off, telling yourself to think more clearly does not fix it. Praying for wisdom does not fix it. Believing harder does not fix it. You need to address the brain at the level where it is broken. You need to resynchronize the two hemispheres. You need to wake up the dormant capacity that is sitting there waiting to activate. And here is what matters most. You are not broken. You are not defective. You are not cursed with bad genes or a bad brain. What you are is switched off, and switched off things can be switched back on. There is a neurologist in New York named Dr. Daniel Barone who has spent the last 20 years studying exactly this problem. He looked at Sperry's research. He understood the mechanism. He understood what it means when hemispheric synchronization goes offline. And he asked himself a question. What if we could reactivate it? What if we could send the right signal to the brain that would wake it back up and restore that synchronization? And he built something. Not based on theory, based on actual neuroscience, based on research that has been studied and validated and tested. He spent years crafting a specific sequence of sounds that, when you listen to them, gently guide your brain back into that state of hemispheric synchronization, not forcing it, not tricking it, just inviting it back online, showing it how to sync again, reminding it of the configuration it was designed to work in. This changes everything. Because if brain fog is not a spiritual problem, if it is not a character problem, if it is actually a neurological problem, then the solution is not to try harder spiritually. The solution is to restore the wiring, to turn the receiver back on, to reactivate the whole brain capacity that is dormant but waiting. If it can be switched off, it can be switched back on. Now you might be thinking, that sounds good in theory, but this sounds complicated. This sounds like something that requires years of practice or special training, or a discipline I do not have. This sounds like something that only works for people who are already spiritual enough, or smart enough, or equipped in some way. I am not equipped, and I understand that thought. I had that thought too. But here is what matters. Restoring hemispheric synchronization is not complicated. It is not something that requires your effort, or your willpower, or your discipline at all. Think about what happens when you fall asleep. You do not have to work at falling asleep. You do not have to force it through discipline or faith or effort. Your brain just naturally knows how to do it when the conditions are right. You do not have to earn sleep. You do not have to deserve it or achieve it. Your brain just does it. It is automatic. It is beneath your awareness. You are not thinking your way into sleep. Your brain is just functioning the way it was designed to function. Restoring hemispheric synchronization works the same way. You do not have to meditate. You do not have to think about it while it is happening. You do not have to visualize anything, or repeat mantras, or do any of the things that sound spiritual, but that require so much conscious effort. You just listen. Your brain does the work. The synchronization restores itself, because that is what brains naturally do when given the right signal. It is not complicated. It is elegant. It is beneath your awareness. This matters because most of us are exhausted from trying. We are worn out from effort. We have spent years pushing and striving and forcing and believing and doing all the things. We have squeezed ourselves empty. And what we need is not another thing to work at. What we need is something that works while we are just living our regular life. Something that does not require us to become more disciplined or more spiritual or more of anything. Something that just restores what is broken at the level where it is broken. And here is what else matters. This is not replacing faith. This is not replacing prayer. This is not replacing your relationship with God or your spiritual disciplines or anything that you know is important. What this is doing is restoring the receiver so that your faith actually connects, so that your prayers actually reach, so that your spiritual eyes can actually see, so that when your Father moves and acts and provides, you can actually perceive it. This is supporting the foundation. This is clearing the channel so that everything else you are believing for can actually flow through. When you understand this, something shifts. The burden lifts a little bit, because suddenly you realize that the problem was never that you were not spiritual enough. The problem was never that you did not have enough faith. The problem was that you had a physical barrier that was preventing your faith from connecting with what God has already done. It was like trying to receive a radio signal on a broken receiver. Your faith was broadcasting. God was broadcasting. But the receiver was not tuned in. Now you understand. Now you can address it. The restoration is possible. It is real. It is based on neuroscience, not just positive thinking. It does not require you to change who you are or become someone you are not. It does not require you to be perfect or spiritual enough or worthy enough. It simply requires that you give your brain the right signal so that it can return to the state it was designed to be in. Full activation, clear perception, whole brain functioning. And that is exactly what I want to tell you about. I want to pause and name something before we go on. Because what I have just described to you is not theory. This is not something that sounds good but does not actually exist. Over the past 20 years, there has been a neurologist in New York named Dr. Daniel Barone, who has been studying exactly this discovery, the one that won the Nobel Prize back in 1981. Sperry's research. The two hemispheres of your brain were designed to work in perfect sync, to communicate constantly, to coordinate, to balance each other, and create full brain activation. And in most adults, that synchronization quietly switched off. It did not happen all at once. It was not dramatic. It just gradually went offline until one day you woke up and realized you could not think clearly anymore. That is not an accident. That is not random. That is a real neurological condition that can be addressed. Dr. Barone did not just study this. He built something from that research. He spent years working on it, refining it, testing it. He worked with his colleagues. He looked at what exactly happens in the brain when hemispheres are in sync and what happens when they are not. He understood the mechanism. He understood what needs to happen to restore it. And from that research, from that understanding, he created something. It is called the genius switch. Now, I am not going to explain the whole of it yet. Not all the details. Not the complete mechanism. That is coming. But I want you to hold this question in your mind as we continue. What if the fog you feel was never about your age? What if it was never about your discipline, or your faith, or your spiritual maturity? What if something was simply switched off? What if the receiver, that is supposed to be tuned in, is just waiting to be reactivated? And what if reactivation is not as hard or complicated as you have been believing? Because that changes everything. It changes how you see yourself. It changes what you believe is possible. It changes whether you think you are broken or whether you think you are just switched off. And switched off things can be switched back on. That is the key insight. If it can turn off, it can turn back on. Your brain has the capacity. It is not lost. It is not gone. It is dormant. It is waiting. It is a matter of sending the right signal so that it wakes up and remembers how to synchronize. Think about what it would mean for you if this were true. If the fog was not your permanent condition, but just a temporary state that could be restored. If your brain could return to the way it was designed to work. If the receiver could be tuned back in, and you could actually perceive clearly again. If your spiritual eyes could open, and you could see what your Father is doing. If you could make decisions from clarity instead of confusion. If you could receive the provision He has already prepared without missing it. What would that mean for your prayer life? What would it mean for your family? What would it mean for the decisions you make and the way you move through the world? What would it mean to trust that you are not broken, that you are not defective, that you are not cursed, that you simply had something switched off that can be switched back on? This is what I want to explore with you. Not as theory, not as nice ideas that sound good but do not work in real life, but as something that is actually based on neuroscience, based on research, based on what actually happens when the human brain is restored to its designed state. Before we get into the details, though, I want to tell you a story about what this looks like when it actually works. Most of you can remember exactly what this felt like. You do not have to search your memory very hard. The feeling is still there. You were young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, maybe younger, maybe older, but you were young enough that you still felt like yourself. And in that version of yourself, your mind worked differently than most other minds around you worked. You learned fast, faster than your classmates. A teacher would explain something once, and you already understood it. You were waiting for everyone else to catch up, while the concept was already clear in your mind. Books made sense to you. Language made sense to you. Patterns made sense to you. Your brain just naturally saw how things connected. You could see the structure underneath things. You understood the mechanics of how something worked just by observing it. Creativity was effortless. You could sit down and create things that surprised people. Stories came to you. Songs came to you. Ideas for how to build things or make things or organize things just appeared in your mind. You were not trying hard. You were not straining. Your mind just generated possibilities. It was like tapping into a well that never ran dry. You were different, and you knew it. People noticed it. Teachers called you gifted. Family members said you had a gift. And it felt true. It felt like something was alive in you that was not quite alive in the same way in other people. You moved through the world from that place. You trusted your instincts because your instincts were right. You could read situations. You could sense what people needed even before they told you. You could navigate complexity easily. You could make connections others missed. And there was a kind of aliveness in that version of yourself, a kind of clarity and flow and confidence that made sense because your receiver was tuned in. Your whole brain was activated. You were operating at full capacity, and you did not even know that was remarkable because it was just normal for you. Then something changed. It was not one moment. It was not like you woke up and suddenly you were different. It was a slow dimming, a gradual reduction. First, you noticed school getting harder. You still understood the concepts, but it took more effort now. You had to study things that used to be obvious. Then it was overwhelmed from too many activities, or too much social complexity, or too many demands on your attention. Then it was stress from adolescence or college or work, or all the things that life started throwing at you. And somewhere along the way, you just got used to feeling unclear. You stopped expecting that sharpness to come back because it had been gone so long. You told yourself, this is just maturity. This is just what happens when you grow up. Everyone feels this way. Everyone has brain fog. Everyone is tired. It is normal. Your standards adjusted to match your current capacity, and you stopped remembering that you had ever been any different. Except you do remember. Deep down you remember. You remember what it felt like to think clearly, to create easily, to perceive things directly and immediately without all the strain. You remember who you were when your whole brain was activated. And sometimes you wonder where that person went. You wonder if you lost them somehow. You wonder if that version of you is just gone and never coming back. But what if that is not what happened? What if you did not lose that capacity? What if it is still there? What if something simply switched off? What if that genius is not dead? It is dormant. And here is what matters most. Research shows that most children operate at a level of creative genius. 98% of children display genius-level creativity and innovation, but less than 1 in 1,000 adults retain that same level of capacity. Why? Not because they got dumber, not because they lost their intelligence, not because they failed at life somehow, but because the hemispheric synchronization that powered that genius got switched off. It is not a personal failure. It is not character weakness. It is neurological theft, something that got stolen at the level of how your brain is wired. It is not your fault, and if that is what happened, then restoration is possible. You have tried willpower. I know you have. You have downloaded the prayer apps, and you have kept them open even when it felt pointless. You have committed to the practices. You have shown up even when your mind was completely empty. You have confessed the promises. You have spoken the scriptures. You have believed. You have really believed that God would answer and that your mind would clear and that you would suddenly perceive the way you are supposed to perceive. And the barrier between you and that breakthrough is still there. You can feel it. It is like there is a wall between what you know intellectually and what you can actually perceive and receive. Your spirit says yes to what God has promised. Your faith is real. Your belief is genuine. But something in you still cannot quite cross the gap. Something in you still cannot quite receive what you know is supposed to be available to you. And here is what I want to tell you. The barrier is not in your spirit. The barrier is not in your faith. The barrier is not because you are not spiritual enough, or you do not believe hard enough, or you have not tried hard enough. The barrier is neurological. It is in the neural pathway where reception actually happens. It is in the synchronization between the two hemispheres of your brain that allow you to perceive clearly. Think about it this way. Imagine you have a radio that is supposed to be tuned to a particular frequency. You believe deeply that the signal is broadcasting. You believe it with your whole heart. Your faith in the signal is complete. But the radio itself is not tuned in. The receiver is set to the wrong channel, or it is damaged, or the synchronization is offline. Now, no amount of believing in the signal is going to make that radio pick it up. The belief is real. The signal is real, but the receiver is not functioning. You cannot bridge a neurological gap with willpower. You cannot cross a neural barrier with discipline. You cannot force a mistuned receiver to pick up a signal through effort alone. This is the discovery that changes everything, because what most believers have been told is that if you just believe harder, if you just pray harder, if you just do the practices more consistently, then you will break through. The barrier will fall. You will receive. And every time you try and it does not work, you blame yourself. You think you must not have enough faith. You must not be spiritual enough. You must be broken somehow. But what if you are not broken? What if your faith is not the problem? What if your belief is actually fine, and it is the receiver that needs to be restored? What if the barrier is not between you and God, but between your current neural state and your full brain activation capacity? Then the solution is not to try harder spiritually. The solution is to restore the wiring, to resynchronize the hemispheres, to wake up the dormant receiver so that it can actually pick up the signal that has been broadcasting all along. You see, receiving restoration cannot come from discipline alone. You cannot think yourself into whole brain activation. You cannot willpower your way into hemispheric synchronization. Your will is powerful, yes. Your faith is real, yes. But at some point, the receiver has to be restored. At some point, the actual neural wiring has to be brought back online. And that is not something you can force through effort. That is something that happens when you give your brain the right signal, when you show it how to sync again, when you invite it back into the state it was designed to work in. This is such a relief when you really understand it. Because it means you are not broken. It means you have not been failing this whole time. It means that every time you tried and nothing changed, it was not because your faith was not big enough. It was because you were trying to solve a neurological problem with spiritual tools alone. The tools were right. The problem was just different from what you thought it was. So, here is the question. What would shift in your life if the barrier between you and clarity was never about your faith at all? What would open up if you knew for certain that your receiver could be restored? What would become possible? Now I need to say something that most people will not say to you. Your willpower has a limit. Your faith has not failed. Your discipline is real. But there is a ceiling, and you are going to hit it. And you are going to hit it no matter how hard you push, because the ceiling is not spiritual. The ceiling is neurological. Think about what happens when someone asks you to see a color that does not exist. You cannot do it. Not because you do not have enough faith or you are not trying hard enough. You cannot do it because your eyes are not wired to perceive colors outside the visible spectrum. It is not a character issue. It is a capacity issue. Your biology has built-in parameters. Your will cannot override them. The same thing happens with brain synchronization. When the hemispheres are not synchronized, no amount of trying is going to force them back into sync through your own effort alone. Your will hits a wall. You can push against that wall forever. You can believe harder and pray more intensely and discipline yourself into exhaustion. But the wall does not move because it is not a wall of resistance. It is a wall of incapacity. It is not that you are refusing to perceive clearly. It is that your brain is not in a state where clear perception is even possible right now. The receiver is offline, and no amount of willpower can turn the receiver on. Willpower cannot fix a circuit that is not functioning. This is the biological impotence. This is the hard truth that most believers hit at some point, and it destroys them because they have been told their whole life that faith and willpower and discipline can overcome anything. And maybe those things can overcome most things, but they cannot overcome a neurological ceiling. They cannot fix something at the level where it is actually broken. You can have perfect faith and still not be able to perceive because the receiver is not receiving. You can have complete discipline and still be fogged because the two hemispheres of your brain are not talking to each other. And every time you push against this ceiling, you get disappointed. Every time you try and nothing changes, your faith takes a hit. You start to wonder if maybe you are the problem. Maybe you do not believe hard enough. Maybe you are not spiritual enough. Maybe God is not actually meeting you the way you thought He was supposed to meet you. And the deeper you go down that road, the more damaged you become because you are blaming yourself for a limitation that is not your fault. Many of you are at this wall right now. You can feel it. You know exactly what I am talking about. You have pushed, and your brain is still foggy. You have tried every spiritual practice, and your perception is still unclear. You have confessed and believed and fasted and prayed, and nothing has shifted. You are exhausted. You are disappointed. And you are beginning to accept that maybe this is just how it is going to be. Maybe you hit your limit. Maybe you cannot go further. But what if the barrier is not permanent? What if the ceiling is not a ceiling at all, but just a misaligned synchronization that can be realigned? What if your biological impotence right now is not because you are broken, but because one specific thing is not functioning the way it is supposed to function? And what if that one thing can be restored? Because here is what matters most. Your brain was designed to synchronize. That is its natural state. That is what it wants to do. It is not fighting synchronization. It is not refusing it. It is just offline right now. And offline things do not respond to willpower. Offline things respond to the right signal. They respond to being invited back into the state they were designed to work in. Your will has done everything it can do. Your faith has gone as far as it can go without this restoration. Your discipline has taken you to the edge of what is possible without addressing the neurological dimension. And now, you need something else. You need something that works at the level where you are actually limited. You need the synchronization itself to be restored. You need your whole brain to come back online. And that is exactly what I want to show you now. I want to share something personal with you. I have been using what I am about to describe to you for years now. My colleagues and I have spent decades researching this exact problem: how to restore hemispheric synchronization, how to reactivate the whole brain capacity that goes dormant when that synchronization switches off. And what I am about to tell you is not theory. This is based on actual research, actual neuroscience, actual results that have been tested and validated and measured. Here is how it works. Your brain has the capacity to synchronize its two hemispheres. That is what it is designed to do. But when that synchronization goes offline, it does not come back online through willpower or prayer or discipline. It comes back online through the right signal, through a specific type of auditory sequence that gently guides your brain back into the state it was designed to work in, not forcing it, not tricking it, just inviting it home to its natural state. This is not brain waves. This is not binaural beats or tones or anything like that. Those only address part of the picture, and most people who try them get no results because they do not address the actual mechanism. What we are talking about is neural sync technology, a specific auditory sequence built from the 1981 Nobel Prize research by Dr. Roger Sperry on split brain synchronization. Dr. Daniel Barone in New York spent 20 years studying exactly how this works, what the mechanism is, what needs to happen for the hemispheres to return to sync. And from that research, he crafted a very specific sequence of sounds that when you listen to them, your brain naturally recognizes and returns to synchronization. The science is elegant. It is not complicated. And it works because it is working at the level where the problem actually exists. It is not trying to spiritualize a neurological issue. It is not trying to willpower a capacity issue. It is directly addressing the synchronization itself, showing your brain how to return to its natural state. And when that happens, everything shifts. I want to tell you what this looks like in real life. There is a woman in California, a nurse from San Diego. She had tried everything you have tried: prayer, journaling, meditation. She believed deeply. She really did. But something in her could not quite receive the connection she knew was supposed to be there. She described it as a channel that should be open, but was somehow blocked. She tried for months. Nothing changed. Then she was introduced to this mechanism. She listened to the sequence for the first time. She did not expect anything to happen really, but after about 10 days, something shifted. She described it as a channel that had been blocked, being suddenly open, not gradually opening. Suddenly, like something switched back on, like the receiver was suddenly tuned in. She could perceive again. She could receive again. She could think clearly again. And she told people about it because what happened was so dramatic and undeniable that she could not help but share it. That is what whole brain activation does. That is what happens when the hemispheres synchronize again. That is what becomes possible when your receiver is restored. Now, as someone who understands that you are seated with authority in Christ, that you are crowned and commissioned, that you are a son or daughter of the Most High, that you carry dominion and power and the capacity to enforce God's kingdom in your sphere. This is what restores the neurological condition to receive from that authority. To perceive what your Father is doing, to act from the place you are actually seated, not creating something new, restoring something dormant, not earning something, reclaiming something that was always yours. This is how you return to your native state of whole brain activation. This is how you become a receiver again. It is called the genius switch. My colleagues said it would be a bargain even at $500. An in-person neurofeedback session costs $300 an hour. A home neurofeedback machine costs $7,000. He cut out the middlemen. It was released at $49. And today on this page, $10 less, $39, plus 4 free companions when you purchase. A guided visualization created by the top creator at the Calm app that walks you through restoration in 4 life areas. A grocery shopping guide that eliminates the 10 foods that cause brain fog and saves you $100 a month. A classic manifestation text over 100 years old that normally costs $20 on Amazon. And a printable habits infographic you can frame and hang on your wall. One thing worth naming: if you search for Genius Switch on YouTube or Spotify, you will find tracks that carry the name. Dr. Barone's team studied them. Most had no neural sync technology embedded at all. The name is easy to copy. The mechanism is not. The direct page is the only verified source. That is where the link below points. Do not settle for the hollow copies. This is a risk-free covenant. Listen once. Listen 80 times. If it does not do for you what it has done for 18,000 people, every dollar returns. No conditions. No questions asked. No strings attached. So if your spirit resonates with what I have shared, the link is in the description and the pinned comment. That is the only place it exists. Walk through the door with the receiver restored before this window closes. Now I know what some of you are thinking right now, and I want to address that directly because it matters. Some of you are thinking, I have tried binaural beats before. I have downloaded the apps. I have listened to the tracks, and nothing happened. My brain fog did not lift. My mind did not clear. I wasted time and money on something that did not work. So why would this be any different? Why should I believe this will work when other things have not? That is a real question, and I understand why you are asking it. But here is what matters. Brain waves and binaural beats only address part of the picture. They might create a certain frequency state in your brain, but they do not address hemispheric synchronization. They do not create the actual communication between the 2 hemispheres that you need. This is a different mechanism entirely, a different category of result. It is not the same technology. It is not the same approach. It is not the same thing with a different name. This is actually addressing what needs to be addressed at the neurological level. Some of you are also thinking, $39 is still money. I do not have $39 sitting around. Times are tight, and I understand that too. But I want you to think about this comparison. An in-person neurofeedback session costs $300 an hour. A home neurofeedback machine costs $7,000. Dr. Barone cut out the middlemen and the overhead and brought the actual mechanism to you directly. $39. And here is the part that matters most. If it does not work for you, even after listening 100 times, every single cent returns. No questions asked, no strings attached. That is not a purchase. That is a deposit you can recall. If it does not do what it is supposed to do, it is the opposite of risk. It is covenant. Some of you are thinking, I do not have time for this. My life is already full. I cannot add another thing to my plate. 8 minutes a day sounds simple, but I know how it actually goes. I will start strong, and then life will happen, and I will miss days, and eventually I will stop. And I hear you. But here is the thing. 8 minutes, while your coffee is brewing in the morning, while your bath is filling, while you are doing dishes or driving or any number of things you already do every single day. This is not about adding more discipline to your life. This is not about creating one more thing you have to succeed at. This is about listening to something for 8 minutes. That is the whole thing. Your brain does the work. You just listen. And if you cannot find 8 minutes, then it is not about time. It is about permission. It is about whether you actually believe you are worth 8 minutes of your own attention. Whether you believe your own restoration matters enough to prioritize it for less than the time it takes to watch a television show. That is the real question underneath that objection. Some of you might be thinking, this sounds too good to be true. I have heard promises before. I have been disappointed before. How do I know this is actually real and not just hype? And I felt that way too when I first encountered this research. So I looked at it. I read the actual studies. I looked at the Nobel Prize research from 1981. Roger Sperry did not win the Nobel for theory. He won it for proven research, validated science. And Dr. Barone built his mechanism from that actual science. Whether it works for you is exactly what the 100% guarantee answers. If it works, you keep it. If it does not work, you get every penny back. The guarantee removes the risk. It removes the reason to doubt. And one last thing. Some of you might wonder, if this is real, why is it not everywhere? Why is it not on YouTube? Why is it not on Spotify? Why have I not heard about it more? There are tracks with that name on those platforms. Dr. Barone's team studied them. Most of them have no neural sync technology embedded at all. The name is easy to copy. The mechanism took years to build. That is why it only exists in one place. That is why the direct link is the only verified source. That is actually a sign of integrity, not a sign of something being hidden. So hear me. You are not making a mistake. Your instinct to try this is sound. Your willingness to restore your brain is not naive. It is wise. It is the most important decision you can make for your own capacity and your own future. Every concern you have is legitimate, and it has already been answered. The risk is gone. The mechanism is real. The results are validated. The only question now is whether you are ready to walk through the door. I want to speak something over you right now, and I need you to hear this not as nice words, but as truth, as declaration, as the recognition of who you actually are. You are not broken. You are not defective. You are not cursed with bad genes or bad luck or a family curse or anything else you have been believing about yourself. You are not lazy. You are not undisciplined. You are not failing at faith. You are not too old. You are not too far gone. You are not beyond reach. You are not the person you have been telling yourself you are. What you are is switched off. What you are is dormant. What you are is a receiver that was tuned in once and is waiting to be tuned back in again. The genius you had as a child did not die. It did not leave you. It did not abandon you. It is still there. It is still alive. It is just waiting for the synchronization to restore. It is just waiting for the hemispheres to talk to each other again. It is just waiting to wake up. And here is what becomes true when that synchronization restores, when that receiver comes back online, when your whole brain activates again. You become a receiver once more. A real receiver. Not somebody who is trying to receive but cannot quite get there, but somebody who is actually tuned in. Somebody who can perceive what your Father is doing. Somebody who can recognize the provision He has already arranged and is moving toward you right now. The eyes open. The spiritual eyes that were always yours but felt closed, they open. You begin to see again, not with your physical eyes, but with the eyes of your understanding, with the perception of your spirit, with the intuition that knows things before you have to think them through. The eyes that perceive the kingdom, the eyes that see your Father's hand moving, the ears hear. When you listen to the voice of your shepherd, you actually hear him. When you sit down to pray, the connection is not muffled anymore. It is clear. It is direct. It is undeniable. You hear not just with your physical ears, but with the ears of your spirit. The receiver is tuned. The signal comes through. You are not praying into a wall anymore. You are listening to your Father, and He is listening to you. The mind fires on all cylinders. The fog lifts. The clarity returns. You think the way you were designed to think. Your creativity comes back. Your intuition comes back. Your capacity to perceive nuance and complexity and beauty comes back. You move through the world from a place of clarity instead of confusion, from a place of wholeness instead of fragmentation, from a place of full brain activation instead of half brain fog. You are restored. Not by your effort, not by your willpower, not by trying harder or being more spiritual or believing bigger. You are restored by giving your brain the signal it was designed to respond to, by inviting the synchronization back, by allowing yourself to return to your native state. And when that happens, everything else becomes possible. The provision your Father arranged becomes recognizable to you. What was passing by, unperceived, suddenly becomes clear. What you could not quite see becomes visible. What you could not quite reach becomes available. Because the receiver that was supposed to receive is finally tuned in. The eyes that were supposed to see are finally open. The ears that were supposed to hear are finally listening. You are a son. You are a daughter. You are seated with Christ in heavenly places. You are crowned with glory and honor. You are commissioned to enforce the kingdom of God in your sphere. You are an heir. You are an inheritor. You are somebody who was born with a gift, and that gift was never lost. It was just switched off. And switched off, things can be switched back on. This is the truth about who you are, not the story you have been telling yourself, not the belief that you are broken or lazy or cursed or beyond help, but the actual truth. You are restored. You are a receiver. You are whole. You are complete. You are seated with authority, and your brain has the capacity to synchronize. Your mind has the capacity to clear. Your perception has the capacity to sharpen. Your life has the capacity to transform. So here is what I want you to do now. The link is in the description in the pinned comment. That is the only verified source. That is the only place where the actual mechanism exists. Everything else is a copy. Everything else is a hollow imitation. But that link is the real thing. That link is your door. Walk through it. Give your brain the signal it was designed to respond to. Invite the synchronization back. Let yourself return to whole brain activation. Let yourself become the receiver again. Let the genius that was switched off come back online. You have spiritual eyes. Now use them.